This is a Let's Talk Church Safety and Security microsode with your host, Paul Buckner. So we're winding down on the realities of a gunfight, a gun battle. One of the realities that you may face is that you may not know you're injured. This has happened time and time again in the real world. I've talked to people that were seriously injured and didn't know it. Blood oftentimes hides. You get an injury, it'll run down the inside of your shirt. This Hollywood idea of blood just soaking up away from your skin into your shirt, into your pants. Yeah, it can happen. It does happen. But from talking to medical professionals, from talking to people that have been in those environments, this is why they cut away clothing, is to look for other injuries. When I was at the scene of the only shooting I'd been at right after it happened, was a gentleman who was shot by his wife. I talked about it before. And he took a gunshot wound to his left forearm, and the bullet did not exit. It had lost so much energy, it ricocheted, and it had lost so much energy that when it hit his arm, it stopped. I thought it had gone up perhaps, and I looked at the back of his arm. And I'm looking because I know bullets do hinky, crazy, weird, zany things. And so we put his tourniquet high and tight because we didn't know, was the blood going to pool? And that's another reality of a gunfight, is if you put, let's say that I get shot in the hand, but I don't realize the bullet has actually traveled up my arm some. I get shot in the forearm and it's actually traveled up into my bicep tricep area, and I can't feel it. If you put a tourniquet right above the injury and the wound is actually up here, you can actually bleed to death into a cavity. The blood can pool in another part of your body. And so I'm not going to argue high and tight versus not high and tight, but what I am going to say is, if you're in a situation where, if in doubt and you've got the ability and you can go high and tight, that's fine. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be wearing that tourniquet more than an hour. So that's one of those realities. And then, so you've got all of the above. And then you have you not knowing you're injured, your teammates not knowing they're injured. So now the dust is settling, law enforcement's on the way, the threat's been taken out, they're down, they're being guarded. Now's the time to start checking for injuries, because you really don't know in many of those cases if you're injured. And people go into shock, and it's amazing what you don't feel. So be prepared to do a buddy check. And when I checked this elderly gentleman over, I was also able to help the first paramedic that arrived. And she and I actually talked the other day, and she said, yeah, the information you gave me was actually useful, and she's not used to that at the scene. How tragic is that in our culture today, that the information that they get most of the time is actually not useful at the scene of something? So, guy's been shot. I'm feeling his wound. Not feeling his wound. I'm feeling 4 wounds. I've gotten his permission. He's conscious and breathing. He gave me verbal permission to check him over for boo-boos. He's wearing a white t-shirt underneath, not coveralls, but overalls. And as we were talking, I said, do you mind if I check you for wounds? So I'm pulling out his overalls and looking down his back. I fully expect to see blood on his white t-shirt. I ran my hands gently down his back. There's no blood loss there. I gently squeezed his legs with his permission. There's no secondary wound. I said, how many times did she fire at you? And he said twice. She fired 3 times. That's another reality. You will not know how many times you fired. Is very likely. They ask people after defensive shootings, cops, whatever, how many times did you fire? 4 times. You have an empty magazine, sir. That's a thing. And that's something that our modern court system is going to have to catch up with, is most of the people that sit in judgment over people who've actually been somewhere and done something have never been anywhere and done anything. So be prepared for that. Mr. Buckner, why did you fire 8 times at the guy? I fired 8 times at the guy because I thought I fired 4. And well, you've trained all these years and you've talked about this stuff, and you fired 8 times, but you thought you fired 4. And that's where you need somebody like a Massad Ayub, who really knows their business, to be able to come in as a professional witness and have your back. These are the realities of a gunfight. You may not know how many shots are fired, And if you don't, look at your weapon. Like if you're at a point where I don't know if the bad guy, coming back to this. If you enjoyed this microsode, check out the video and audio versions of the Let's Talk Church Safety and Security podcast.